everybody, and welcome to our latest episode of A Beginner's Guide to Formula One. This week, Jared and I are going to be talking about our biggest takeaways from the British Grand Prix, some team updates on our chosen mid-table team between McLaren and Renault, and discussing many other topics just related to the world of Formula One. But before we get started, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on SoundCloud, so we can help make better content for everyone. So Jared, how about you get us started off? What are your biggest takeaways from the British Grand Prix this weekend?
So I'll start with Ferrari. Charles Leclerc had another really good race, performing a race weekend, performing well despite Ferrari's apparent inferiority. You know, he showed really good pace, obviously qualifying in fourth, only a tenth behind Verstappen too, which is pretty impressive for how bad the Ferrari is this year.
Yeah.
I think Ferrari is getting better this year though, and their car is. Vettel is obviously still having some struggles. But, I mean, for all their struggles, Leclerc has gotten them 2 podiums in the 4 races. So, I mean, it's not terrible. They might still be battling with McLaren instead of Red Bull this year, but that's a big takeaway. My second one that I'm sure you guys were all thinking about is the tires. And especially with Lewis Hamilton, it was actually, not a very great weekend for him in terms of his, performance. He spun during qualifying in Q2. Got into the gravel, tire puncture obviously on the last lap wasn't obviously entirely his fault, but he had not a spotless weekend that we usually expect from him. So I thought that was interesting. What about you, Lucas?
Well, I think relating to what you mentioned with Lewis Hamilton, just Mercedes looked less than invincible for the first time in a while. Again, Not entirely up to the drivers, but both Hamilton and Bottas had tire issues. Hamilton ended up, I think speaks to his skill and just a little bit of his luck that he was able to win anyway, despite having, a lot of those issues. And I also talked about Ferrari, but instead of talking about Charles Leclerc, Sebastian Vettel, I think this showed that he's just sort of past his peak of relevancy at this point. He doesn't seem to be really giving it all in his last year in Ferrari. And, you could make the car excuse, but then you see Charles Leclerc have 2 podiums already this year. While he finished 10th.
That's true.
He couldn't seem to make moves the entire time. And it just seems like he's kind of phoning in his last year with Ferrari, if we're being honest. So
it is fair to question how much the fire is there. I think he said that during the offseason, that he wasn't sure if he had the motivation to race anymore, I believe. But yeah.
Who knows? And then one last one. Not really much analysis related to it, but I just feel really bad for Nico Hülkenberg. He finally came back this year, got his ride with Racing Point after Perez got got COVID and couldn't race, and then the car just didn't start and he couldn't run at all. So he went through that whole crazy process of coming back and just he couldn't race at all. So I feel bad for Nico Hülkenberg.
That's crazy that they couldn't get the car started. I don't know. That just kind of baffles me.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to add to, looking ahead to next week, I feel like almost certainly teams are going to do more 2-stop strategies. Everybody tried to do a 1-stop, on the mediums and hards. But the tire compounds are going to be even softer this week. It's going to be, last week it was the 3 hardest tires. Now they're getting a little bit softer. So it will be cooler next weekend though. This weekend, it reached over 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, I think it was the hottest ever recorded day in the history of England. A few days before that too. So.
Jeez. Yeah, so this weekend it's only going to be around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So they might be able to get away with 1 stop still, but I feel like you would want to stop twice after seeing that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I know Pirelli also said they're going to try and improve the quality of tires for this weekend, but who really knows how that'll go.
Yeah. Looking into our specific midfield teams, as Lucas mentioned, why don't you give us a little analysis / update on Renault, Lucas?
So it was a great weekend for my boys at Renault. Daniel Ricciardo finished just outside the podium in 4th place, his best finish ever with Renault, and his highest finish since the last Grand Prix of the 2018 season when he was still with Red Bull. So great for him. The car survived, which is more than a lot of other people could say. So he slid into 4th. And Esteban Ocon also did very well, finishing in 6th. Yeah. So overall, they did great. Their tires didn't fall apart. They both drove well and put themselves in great point scoring positions. So for Renault this weekend, 2 thumbs up.
Yeah. They definitely did have a good weekend. They're starting to, I think, solve their reliability issues as well that they had in the first couple races.
Yeah.
It's crazy too that Daniel Ricciardo, this is his best finish with Renault. Fourth is his best finish. Yeah. Not even a podium. It's crazy.
Especially coming from someone who at one point was like third overall in the driver's standings at the end of a season. For like him being fourth in a race to be like his best in 2 years is crazy.
Right. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. But what about McLaren? How'd they do this weekend?
It would have been a great weekend if not for Carlos Sainz's puncture at the end of the race. So dropping him out of points too. He was in P4 at the time, so that's a real bummer. But they did have some really good teamwork. Right after the second safety car, when Kvyat got in a crash, it was Sainz, Ricciardo, and Norris, and then Sainz held up Ricciardo so that Norris could go around the outside on a turn. It was in like lap 19 or early 20s. Mm-hmm. They have super great teamwork at McLaren, so that was a cool move to see. I think they should, like I said, they should look at a 2-stop strategy next race to mitigate the damage. As a team, they have, so it's interesting. They have the reliability of a Mercedes, but not yet the speed. Like they and Mercedes are the only teams to have both drivers finish every race. Like Carlos Sainz still finished this race. Same with Bottas. Yeah. They still technically crossed the finish line. And they're the only team to have both drivers make it into Q3 every weekend. Mm-hmm. So like they have a good car, and they're going to a Mercedes engine next year. So like, I mean, they could be even more dangerous with Ricciardo and Norris too.
Yeah, I agree.
They could be very dangerous next year,
especially with Ricciardo coming in. Like we'll talk about Sainz later, but I think it's a pretty established fact that Ricciardo, at least at his peak, is a better driver than Sainz. So with that car and with the Mercedes engine, I think him and Norris could do really good things next year.
Yeah, they could be dangerous. Already looking ahead to next year though, because
exactly, it doesn't look like anybody else, but Mercedes is gonna claim the title this year. Yeah. So speaking of Carlos Sainz, next year he's gonna be moving to Ferrari. So do you think he still has a lot to prove to the Ferrari fans before he makes that big move, taking over for Vettel next year?
I'm a big Carlos Sainz fan. I think he does have some to prove, but not a ton, in my opinion. Like he's kind of like doing okay, but not above expectations. Like you would kind of expect maybe from somebody who's going to be joining Ferrari that they're racing a little bit above expectations. Mm-hmm. Lando's out-qualified Sainz in 3 of the 4 races. That being said, Sainz is consistent. He's earned points in in the first 3 races, and he would have earned points if not for something that was mostly out of control with the tires. So he's still consistent. But the only race where he's gained places was the very first race. Mm-hmm. And that was because of 2 DNFs too, with Albon and Verstappen. So, I mean, he has good pace in qualifying, like decent pace in qualifying, but then the race day, he's got some, he still needs to prove a little bit. I think he knows that too. He's been disappointed in his finishes, he said. So I think he knows that. Especially in a year, think about it, when McLaren, like, may have a better car than Ferrari, you should be like either out driving or driving consistent with Leclerc, probably. So I don't know. What do you think?
No, I mean, I basically came to the same conclusion as you did. Like, I think he's been good, but not great, and you'd expect great from someone who is joining Ferrari, or at least great within like the confines of what he could do in a non-Mercedes car. Yeah. I think you mentioned this too, but Lando Norris has been arguably better than him this year, qualifying higher, finishing higher in a lot of races. There have been highlights for him. I think he got a fastest lap in one of the first 2 Grand Prix. Sainz did. Him and Norris each got one. He finished 5th. But he has fallen back from the high starting positions. And, though this weekend wasn't his fault, he blew out the tire and finished out of the points. And I just don't think it's like, if someone's joining Ferrari, you expect the best out of them. And he has given, like, I don't know, if you'd expected 8 out of 10 for someone joining Ferrari, or 9 out of 10, he's been like consistently a 6 or a 7, in which he's like above average, and like you can see what's there and why Ferrari is picking him as one of their new drivers. But I just think he needs more consistent results throughout the year and to improve upon his qualifying rather than just sort of lingering around where he starts or falling back.
Yeah. And you see like F1 teams gamble a lot, or they like put a lot of stock into like the promise of a driver and like that, this driver's going to improve once he gets the right car and everything. Mm-hmm. But I mean, he has the right car now. I not saying he hasn't improved, but he has the right car now. So I want to see him. Yeah, I want to see him improve, but through this season as he gets more used to the car and everything. So.
Yeah, agreed. At the very least, I think he'll be an improvement over Vettel, who's there now.
Yeah, he probably will. Yeah.
So, going into one big team from Ferrari to another team in Red Bull, we're going to talk a little bit about their specific strategy within this race, and then a little more about sort of the dynamics between their drivers. So, first off, Verstappen pitted right at the end of the race, and it might have cost him the win. Do you think that was the right decision, Darren?
I mean, yeah, if they saw that Verstappen's tires were also on the ropes, which I think they did, then it's a good decision. But to be fair, like, I don't know, there's a definite possibility that Hamilton would also suffer a blown tire if if the Mercedes car did too. Mm-hmm. And like, what is really, why go for like one extra point by getting the fastest lap? Like, mm-hmm. How much is that really that valuable? I don't know. I get it. Like they thought they had a free pit stop. I totally get it, but I don't know. I think you would want to. I would want to stay out there and try to get the race win rather than like, okay, well, let's just get this one extra point. Like, you know, because you might, even if you pit, you might not get the fastest lap. It might just be a wasted pit stop. But if you stay out, Hamilton has a problem. You get 7 extra points. So. I'm not too mad with it, but yeah.
Yeah, nor am I. I think hindsight's really 20/20 on this one. Like like everyone else's tires were like going, and I don't know if it's like in the moment worth the risk of like maybe your tires go out, but you also might get first versus like Hamilton's tires, you know, might blow out, and I might jump that place, but I could also like fall back to 12th or something like that. So I get it. I mean, like you said before, the fastest lap point is nice. So if you don't think that you can jump that high up, you might as well go for it. So, I mean, like, yes, in retrospect, I think it would have been nice for him to not pit and have a shot at winning the race, but I don't blame that call in the moment at all. I think it was probably the right decision in the moment.
Yeah, I think that like Red Bull probably doesn't. I feel like at this point, then they're not trying to beat Mercedes. Really, they're just trying to hold on to their second spot. Yeah. That's what I kind of inferred by that move. That like we're just trying to get that one extra point might separate us from McLaren or Ferrari, but it's not going to separate us from Mercedes. They're already 40 points ahead, something like that.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Which is, you know, not the worst strategy in terms of just, like, the optics of it. Like, having that second place versus maybe slipping into third or fourth when you already know that gap is so big to first.
Yeah, that's a good point. Does it look better to close the gap to Mercedes or just to hold on to second? Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. So, talking about Verstappen, do you think he has a shot at catching Bottas for the number 2 spot in the Drivers' Championship? He's now 6 points behind, I believe.
So,
6 points.
Realistically, as much as I want it to happen, I think I'm going to say no. I think the Mercedes car is just too good, even though I think Verstappen is the better driver of the two of them. Bottas is still ahead after finishing outside the points this week, and I don't think that's going to happen again. I think, you know, there might be a race or two where Verstappen finishes higher than him, but overall, I just don't think Red Bull has the car to consistently outperform Mercedes, and that's what it comes down to. I think more than driver skill at any point. So, as much as I want it to happen, and I think it might be close for that second spot, I can't see Verstappen getting it. What about you?
I think he has a shot. Yeah,
really?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. Well, so because think about it, if Verstappen and Bottas are now equal in that they both had a race where they didn't score points because Verstappen's first race,
that's true,
he didn't finish. Mm-hmm. So I mean, if Verstappen didn't have problems that race, he would be ahead right now. But you know, that's so many what ifs. But I think Red Bull thinks their car is getting better each week. They still are like a second behind Hamilton, but Bottas is not on the pace of Hamilton. So And if there's a safety car, like they get lucky with the safety cars. Like I remember the first race, Alex Albon had a chance to get first possibly because of safety cars. Mm-hmm. So if things like that happen in races, he's definitely got a shot. I'm not counting him out yet. So yeah, we'll see. But I'm not counting him out.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Alex Albon, he finished P8 this week, if I'm not mistaken. So do you think there should be more pressure on him to get better results at this point?
I don't think there should be, but I think he is definitely feeling pressure. Mm-hmm. Like the first race, he was fearless. He maybe could have won it. He was like I don't care if Lewis Hamilton's in front of me. I'm gonna pass him.
Mm-hmm.
And then questionable move. It was kind of a racing incident, but questionable move anyway. Now I think he's pushing a little bit and making some clumsy mistakes, which you saw when he collided with Magnussen this week.
Yeah.
Because right now he's battling with like Gasly and like Vettel and like Perez when he should be battling with like Leclerc and Norris right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like he should be up. He probably should be 4th or 5th in the driver's standing this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, his race day performance has been like pretty good overall. Like he made up a lot of spots, but he needs to fix qualifying though. I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean that's my biggest takeaway too. Is that like I think he has the potential to be an impressive driver, and while I don't think there's like mounting pressure on him yet, I think if he doesn't get up into that like Norris Leclerc type range in the next few races or by the end of the season, then I feel like the walls start to close in a little bit. Like I feel like at this point, like. If Verstappen is only like 3rd overall in the driver's standings and Albon is 6th, I feel like that's somewhat reasonable, but you'd expect him to maybe be a place or 2 higher. And I think he does have the potential to be a great driver, like we said. Like him moving from the back of the pack to 8th is like a genuinely impressive drive, over the course. So like, while P8 might not be great in the greater scheme of things, like looking at this race specifically, like I think he drove impressively. And again, he hasn't been horrible this year. He has some upper tier finishes, but I just don't think that necessarily those will hold up in Red Bull, as you've seen them like axe drivers pretty quickly recently with Pierre Gasly. And even though Albon has been like as a whole, I think a little better than Gasly was, like it's not a big enough gap between like how good each of them were at this stage that I could see them giving Albon a long leash. Like I could see if the results start to slip even a little bit, maybe he gets cut.
Yeah. I mean, he only has 10 races this year too,
Yeah.
I mean, probably, at least we don't really know yet on if the calendar's solidified, but yeah, it's a coronavirus year. You gotta give him a long leash.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, you brought up Gasly. Pierre Gasly finished 7th. He had a good race. Mm-hmm. Is he underrated?
Yes. In short, I think he is. I think he's a better driver than people give him credit for. I think it was like a hard situation last year with Red Bull taking over for Daniel Ricciardo, who, like we mentioned before, was like 3rd in the driver's standings at one point overall. And I think he might have just been a little nervous getting into it. I think if you look at their first 4 races last year and Albon's this year, Gasly in his first 4 in 2019 with Red Bull was 11th, 8th, 6th, and retired. And Albon was 13th, 4th, 5th, and 8th. And which I think is like, yes, Albon has been slightly better, but it's like sort of within the margin of error there, and a retirement isn't always your fault for Gasly. So I think they're 2 drivers of pretty similar skill, and I think because he was cut from Red Bull last year, Gasly's just sort of seen as a failure. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that's necessarily reflective of his skill as a driver, which I think is probably in contention with a guy like Albon.
Yeah. Should he? Okay, so this is my question. Should he? Do you think Gasly wants the Red Bull seat? Do you think he'll ever be back at Red Bull, or what do you think? Or is Gasly racing for something else?
If I were him, I wouldn't want to be back in Red Bull, if I'm going to be honest. Like, if they didn't believe in me after, like, a half a bad season, like, I think he's racing for a spot. Maybe not at, like, a Ferrari or a Mercedes yet, but maybe, like, move up to a McLaren or a Renault or a team that's, like, upper of the best of the rest, and then maybe from that point try and move into, like, a Ferrari and Mercedes. But at this point, I think he's sort of racing for one of those seats. And then seeing where his career goes from there. But if I were him, I wouldn't go back to Red Bull. Like, they didn't believe in him and only gave him a half a season. So,
I mean, Red Bull they probably won't take him back anyway, just because I'm sure there's like a lack of trust in some ways between those parties.
Yeah.
Another question: do you think Gasly like is genuinely comparing himself to Albon right now, or that he has a rivalry with him, or do you think that the Gasly Albon thing is kind of like manufactured by us?
I don't know. It's hard to divorce it in my head because, like, if I were him, if I were Gasly, I'd be like, I want to beat Albon every week. Like, he took my spot, and I'm in, like, a worse car at this point, and I'm, like, placing ahead of him in some races. But I don't know. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's mostly manufactured by us. Mm-hmm. Because Because I don't think he has a rivalry with Albon because he's like Albon didn't like force his way in. Like the Red Bull is Red Bull's decision to take me out. So I don't think he has any like bad blood with Albon or anything. I think he's just racing. He just wants to get the best results possible with AlphaTauri to get it. To get in a better car. So I think Gasly's super underrated. Like he was in sixth place of the driver's standings when he got dropped by Red Bull, which is exactly where he should have been, really. Yeah. Like when you think the 2 Mercedes drivers, 2 Ferrari drivers, and then Verstappen, are ahead of him. That's like where he should have been. I mean, I don't even know if he should have got dropped just because they were measuring him to, like you said, to Daniel Ricciardo, who was winning races and everything. Where Gasly's like young and he's still like, I think he's 24, like he's still super young.
Yeah.
But yeah, Gasly obviously is better than his teammate. Like his race day performance has been great. I will say that a lot of the places he's gained in races have been to retirements. Mm-hmm. Like in this weekend, he gained 2 places to retirement basically. But two of them were genuine, either through pit strategy overtakes. So yeah, I think he's overrated or underrated in general. Another question for you though, Lucas. So if a spot for a top team, like let's say Mercedes or Ferrari, opened up, would you take Gasly or George Russell?
So I realized I just hyped up Gasly a lot, but I think I would choose George Russell. So I think at this point, Gasly has had the chance to prove himself on a top team, and it didn't come through. Like I think he might need like sort of a stepping stone to like go from current team to like McLaren to Ferrari or Mercedes. But I think George Russell is just like such raw talent that like I might take a chance on him if I were like Mercedes or Ferrari. And if it doesn't work out for a year, then like so what? But I think he's shown like he has the potential to do very well. He won the F2 championship in 2018, and there's not really much he can currently do in a Williams car. Yeah. So like I think I might take a chance on somebody who is just, from everything I've read and from what you can see in the car he's in, have just like a lot of raw talent. So I think if I were in a Mercedes or Ferrari, it might not work out. It's a high risk, high reward, but I take George Russell. What about you?
I like both of the drivers. I get the hype around George Russell, but I also don't get the hype around him because we're really just betting all on promise. We haven't seen because like you said, he can't prove really anything. We're thinking in the Williams. Mm-hmm. So I would want to see what he can do in like a car that actually can compete before I'd like, yeah, the Mercedes spot is yours.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I mean, Gasly was the GP2 champion in 2016, which has now become Formula 2. Mm-hmm. So he knows how to race. I don't know. We could even question, has Russell really gotten the best out of the car? He probably has, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so hard to judge in a car that, like, honestly, even on its best day, probably won't be in the points.
Yeah. I know that George Russell fans will be like, well, he outperforms his teammate, Latifi, but Gasly has the same argument, so at AlphaTauri. So, honestly, I would rather, I feel like Gasly, with his, like, experience, I'm sure he's gained, like, a lot of maturity from his whole Red Bull experience. And I would feel a lot more comfortable giving him a spot than George Russell. I would want to see George Russell racing for like a Racing Point or like a McLaren or Renault or somebody in the midfield that like actually has a shot at getting points to see what he can do. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. But
yeah, I think you might have swayed me a little bit. So.
Well, there's a lot of, I agree. There's a ton of promise with George Russell, but I just don't know. So. That will conclude our episode today, though. Thank you for watching or listening. As always, please subscribe and leave a like on YouTube because, as Lucas said, that will tell us what content you guys enjoy, and it will help us make better videos and audio in the future. Comment below with your thoughts as well on any of the takes, especially if you would take Gasly or George Russell. Let us know on that. And have a good week. Thank you.